So I'm going to tell you the story of my first date, which is both a lesson in how autistic people often struggle with hints and unspoken expectations, and also how not to do a first date. Before I get to the day it happened, a little bit of background. I've always struggled with romance. It's a language that I never learned how to speak. There are a couple of fairly subtle reasons for that, but when it comes to my autism, the biggest obstacle for me is the extra layer of social expectations, as if the super secret expectations of regular relationships weren't enough. So it won't surprise you to learn that my first date wasn't until I was 17, and that my first serious relationship started when I was 35. Frankly though, I don't care. It's better to be single for a few decades and end up with the right person than get into a relationship with the wrong person just for the sake of not being single. So when I was 17, I ended up going out with this nice girl. I'm going to pretend her name was Mandy. She seemed quite nice and we'd spoken once before, so obviously we were a perfect fit. There was an extra strategic reason for our relationship though. One of my closest friends really wanted to go out with this girl from another group of friends, so he came up with this idea to maximise his chances of being with her. So he suggested that a bunch of our group of friends and a bunch of her group of friends would all pair off and it would be quite a bit of a laugh, but honestly there were quite a lot of people involved in this scheme. Now looking back, I'd tell my younger self that this was not the right way to get into a relationship. I mean, me and Mandy had spoken once during a school trip to Belgium about this boy band we both liked, and had I not been helplessly autistically loyal to my friends, this whole relationship and this video would never have happened. So the agreement was made, and Mandy's friends went to her in the middle of school and announced, "Mandy, you're going out with Bonello." Okay. Later that day, I asked her out in the most in-character way that I knew how. During lunch break, and I should probably mention that we were in sixth form at the time, which was a voluntary form of education for 16 to 18-year-olds in Britain, and because it was voluntary it meant you could walk out at any time, including for take-out pizza during lunch. I went up to this girl and opened my new relationship with these perfectly chosen words. "Hi, that looks like nice pizza. Will you go out with me?" Okay. So there we both were, together at the behest of another person, and both of us knowing it quite frankly, but neither of us really minded because despite the comedic way we got together, we actually ended up being really good friends. In fact, in the end we were the only couple that ended our relationship on good terms. In my experience, I'm actually a pretty good person to break up with. But anyway, Mandy and I went on our very first date to our local pub for a pub lunch between lessons. And let me tell you, as an autistic person, first dates are a social minefield. Not only are there all the aforementioned social expectations, but also your mind is flooded with some very high intensity questions. Do they like me? Am I impressing them enough? What should I say to them? How have I offended them so far? Because when you're autistic, it often feels like offending other people is an inevitability. Because of our struggles with reading comfort zones and neurotypical people's struggles with saying what they mean and meaning what they say, often we don't ask ourselves, am I offending someone, but rather, how have I already offended this person? But it seemed to be going rather well. Then again, I was never really perceptive as a teenager. I was very good at being kind and caring and compassionate towards people, but I wasn't very good at being socially acceptable, and to a lot of people that's what counts. Anyway, possibly because of what she had been told about first dates, Mandy had this obscure idea that I was supposed to pay for her food as well as mine. Of course, nobody told me this. Like most unspoken expectations in life, I think I was just supposed to know that this was a thing, through telepathy or carrier pigeon or being a childhood member of that super secret club that all non-autistic people are a part of that teaches you these rules in a private treehouse somewhere. Anyway, Mandy and I were sat in the pub during lunchtime, with me wondering how many times I had already offended her, and her wondering why I hadn't jumped at the chance to pay for her food. And due to her communication deficits associated with her being non-autistic, she didn't specify what was on her mind. All she could do in that situation was the one thing that you should not do to an autistic person. She dropped a hint. "What are you having?" I asked, in a great attempt at making conversation, as well as it being a functionally useful and very practical question. I don't know," she replied. "Chris, I'm not sure whether I have enough money to pay for my food and for the bus home." Which I heard and interpreted as, "Chris, I'm not sure whether I've got enough money to pay for my food and for the bus home." Call it my communication disorder, but I'm pretty sure that's what she said. So this presented a difficulty that she was probably looking for a well-calculated, logical answer for. And obviously, I got thinking. And there was an answer so clear and so obvious, I was surprised she hadn't spotted it herself. So the scene went like this. "Chris, I'm not sure whether I have enough money to pay for my food and for the bus home." "Oh, don't worry, cheesy chips were only $1.75. Okay. Now I know what you're thinking, and yes, $1.75 is a really good price for cheesy chips. But that was 2002, those days are gone. More relevantly though, Mandy was not happy. Not that I found out for another 4 months, but she wasn't happy. That response was not the very specific solution that she was secretly looking for. As far as I could tell, the rest of the date went completely fine. In fact, it might have been one of those rare occasions where I hadn't actually offended anyone. I was really looking forward to more dates with Mandy. We lasted 4 months before we broke it off. We went our separate ways, and I spent the next few years learning absolutely nothing about the rules and regulations of first dates and the art of psychically calculating what people expected of me but were too British and reserved to mention specifically. But she did get me really into the Lord of the Rings, so that was a positive. Honestly, growing up helps a lot with these things. As I became an adult, I finally came to realise that first dates, and relationships in general, don't tend to go well if you're so committed to studying and obeying the rules that you basically end up dating the rules rather than dating a person. There's got to be authenticity rather than blind obedience, otherwise neither you nor the other person will actually know what kind of person you're with, and you'll be assessing each other based on how well you can match rules written by other people instead of how well you actually get on together. Nearly a decade later, I went on another first date. Thankfully, this is with a friend who I'd known for several years, so we already knew each other fairly well. We went for an all-you-can-eat Chinese and ate our own body weight in good food because neither of us was trying to impress the other. We were just enjoying each other's company. Now you may also be wondering, hey Chris, why are you even into relationships in the first place? Well, let's just say that romance, sexuality and companionship are all three completely different things. I mean, me and romance go as well together as lasagna and ice cream, and I've never been able to make much sense of what romance is supposed to involve or the reasons behind it. But I've always valued companionship and I've always valued love, and that's different. So, how did I end up in a serious relationship? Well, it was nothing to do with first dates, and sadly it had nothing to do with cheesy chips. Me and my best friend spent several years building up a very close and trusting relationship, which went further and further as we were naturally our authentic selves around each other, until one day we had a discussion about it. You realise we've been basically functioning as a family unit for the last couple of years. Yeah, and my children have started referring to you as a dad. We should probably address this. How about we make it official and recognise that we're actually together? Okay. So that's where I am now. And take it from me, a relationship based entirely on trust is much healthier and much safer than a relationship based on physical attraction. I don't know who needs to hear that, but it's true. And speaking as an autistic person, the world is already filled with enough strange, undefined social conventions that don't resonate with our brains. So when it comes to the things that truly matter, like choosing whether to be in a relationship with someone, in my opinion, that should be a zone where you should feel able to be your authentic self. Because when we're allowed to be authentic, it increases the chances of us finding the right people, and the right people finding us. So that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this truly awful animation. Like, subscribe, etc. Bye.